Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today grew up in Kansas City, where she had a front row seat to the demographic shifts, the hope, and the turmoil of the civil rights era of the 1960s. She has a bachelor's degree in urban studies from Washington University in St. Louis, where she developed a passion for how cities work and don't. She began her career as an urban planner and spent many years working for large consulting firms specializing in urban infrastructure. She now lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her husband and their dog, Boris, who is the inspiration for the German Shepherd in East of Troost. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Ellen Barker.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Our first question on Authors Over 50 is always, so what took you so long to write your first book?
It's a great question, and it's a question I ask myself all the time. Why did I wait so long? I think I always wanted to be a writer from the time I could read, which was at a young age. I actually don't remember not being able to read. And I did write during high school. I was encouraged to write during high school by my teachers. But I think I went off to college and I got involved in the urban studies program, and I was passionate about that. It was, it's economics, it's politics, it's too much politics, it's a lot of social science, and it was so interesting to me that I kind of got diverted, and that's what I did for my career. And then, of course, as many careers, they morph into other things, and you kind of forget where you came from. So it wasn't really until I had retired that I had this aha moment that the two are not at all exclusive, that it's good to bring whatever you do outside of writing into your writing. That's an advantage of being older. If you start younger, then you have a different way of writing. But for those of us over 50, it's a great benefit for us, I believe.
It certainly is. And it gives us a different perspective and hindsight and lots of wisdom that goes along with that.
That's right. And also a lot of anecdotes that you can work in.
Ellen, one of your book descriptions states that the novel is about subtle racism today, overt racism in the past, and soul searching about what to do about it in everyday living. Tell us more.
So the narrator of this book, it's written in first person, and the narrator moves back to Kansas City where she grew up because she's had some serious setbacks, financial setbacks, and she moves back, buys this house, that she grew up in, which is in a neighborhood that has become much different than it was when she previously lived there. So she's now living in a Black neighborhood for the most part, and with a freeway that's been built nearby. And so there's a lot of, she thinks back to what it was like a little bit before any of that happened, but mostly when she was a teenager, when that was happening, when the demographics were shifting, and she, learns things she didn't know then about why it was happening, and then why they would run a freeway through there, which happened to be because it was now a different demographic and easier to do the home, to buy people's homes and move people out. So she does a lot of soul searching about that, and that's a lot of what gets woven in. And does she belong there, and should she be there, and is it beneficial or not for this white woman to be moving back into this neighborhood?
Well, once you wrote this book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to choose a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
I wanted this book to get out there. I think most of us do, of course, but I liked the combination of fiction and nonfiction, just in that this was an actual place. The story is fiction, but the place and the politics and the background are true. So I wanted to get that out there. So I did not want to self-publish. So I did what most of us do. I looked for an agent, and I had the experience that most of us over 50 have, at least in the fiction world. I did not find an agent. And part of doing that was I went to the library and I go to the new bookshelves and pull off all the literary fiction and see who was acknowledged as the agent. Looking for agents who might be willing to take me on. And that was another way to not get an agent, it turns out. But I ran into books that were published by She Writes Press. And I didn't know much about the indie press world, but I discovered that She Writes it's an in-between press. It's a hybrid. So it's a small independent press, but it's distributed through the major distributors so that it can get into libraries and bookstores. One of the things I also didn't know, when you self-publish, you can't really get a bookstore and a library to buy your book, because they really need to work through their usual channels. So She Writes met those requirements, and I submitted, and that was accepted. So that was my journey. It took me a long time to figure that out, but after I did, then things have gone pretty smoothly.
Well, they are very well respected in the industry, and they create such a wonderful community among their writers.
That's true. They publish a spring and a fall cohort of writers. So we do have that group of writers who are all publishing in the same time frame. So yeah, you're right. That's great. And that's been great. Having the cohort is wonderful.
What was your inspiration for this book?
I was back in Kansas City 5 years ago for my high school reunion. For some reason, my high school class is still pretty close. And so a lot of us get together. And so I was there in Kansas City. So I drove down my street, which is a street that now most people most of my friends and relatives will not drive down, and they will not go through that neighborhood. So, but I wanted to go by and see the house. And it was clearly vacant, had a blue tarp on the roof, and clearly nobody lived there. So my husband was with me, and we got out and looked in all the windows, and it was just amazing to look into this house that had not changed that much. And I left when I was 18, but to peek in all the windows and look in the backyard and see what had changed and what hadn't, but to also realize that this house was abandoned and anything could happen to it. So I think it was sometime after that, just thinking about this house after I had seen it, that I decided I can't do anything about that house or that neighborhood, but I could write a different future for it. I could write a fictional future for it. So that's what I did. And for some reason, the way to do that seemed to be to put myself into somebody else's shoes and move back there myself and walk in the front door.
Well, I love when sentimental journeys cause a flick of something that inspires us to create a story.
Yeah, that's definitely what happened here. I don't think the book turned out to be too sentimental, but you're right about that was the spark.
And it is sad to see the changes that cities go through, and the neighborhoods definitely have lifespans, and a lot of times when certain issues happen in cities, it causes those neighborhoods to change, and not always for the better.
That's right. And in this case, this happened. I want to make it clear in the book that this is not something that just happened in Kansas City. That back before the civil rights movement, their neighborhoods were carved out and lines were drawn, and that's what the red lines were. And areas were delineated for Black and white. And our neighborhood was white, and it was determined that it would be Black, or it would be, they weren't going to move white people out, but Black people were going to be allowed to buy houses there, and this is one of the things that the narrator deals with, is like, well, that's a great thing. They finally are going to let Black people buy houses, but they're only going to let them buy in this one area. And then worse than that, they're going to sort of force the white families out. There's no real integration here at all. This was not intended to be integration. This was intended to be a ghetto. It was designed that way. And then the realtors did all they could to get white people to move out, because then they could churn the market and sell more houses to the Black families. And then once it was majority Black, then it was easy to run the freeway through the Black neighborhood. So all things that she saw happening in her teenage years, didn't understand, and then comes back and is like, oh my God, what happened here?
Well, I grew up in Mississippi, so I know of what you speak.
Yeah.
How did you determine the plot of your book?
That's interesting. It's interesting talking to my cohort of writers, the ones that are writing nonfiction or the ones that are writing fiction. There's seem to be two camps. Some people outline it. They know what they're going to write. I did not. So the narrator walks in the front door, and I walked in with her writing the book, and sort of found out what happened as I wrote it. And I would find myself sort of lost in the story and not aware of what day or time it was. And then when I would stop writing and go do whatever, if I didn't get back to it in a day or so, I'd be like, I wonder what's going on with, oh, wait, that's my story. And then I have to go write some more to find out what happens. I didn't have in my head what was going to happen. Occasionally I did. I mean, I knew I had to go back and tie up some loose ends and all, but I did not have the end or even all the plot laid out until I got there.
So you're definitely a pantser.
Yeah, I'm a pantser. Seat of the pants. Yes, that is how I write.
What about your routine? Are you a morning person or a night person? Do you write every day?
I don't write every day. I did for quite a while, but now I've got several novels sort of backed up, and I've only gotten the first one published, and the second one is in the works. And like, can I write? Can I have 10 out there in the pipeline? I'll forget what they're about. So I don't read at the moment. I'm not writing a lot, but when I was writing this book, I write mostly in the morning, and I did pretty much write every day. Most days, obviously, things intervene, but I cannot write at night. I discovered, because then I can't sleep afterwards, because it's all in my head, what's going on. So
it's so true. And these characters really do take control, and they start talking to us.
Yes, they do. Yeah, and they demanded a second book after this one. So,
well, your fans will do the same. They'll want to know what happened.
It's absolutely true. I was lucky that I guess I was worried about it at the beginning, but my 50th high school reunion was 4 or 5 days after my pub date. And so they wanted me to bring the books and sell them directly to them, which I did. And when's the next one? What happens next? Yeah. So
That's very exciting.
yes.
Did real people inspire any of your characters?
Some did, and some more than others. The next door neighbor, Josie, is named after a next door neighbor I had when I was much younger. And she isn't so much the person as she is the feeling of this person next door, this dear retired older woman. So that was an inspiration. There is an older brother in the book, and he's not exactly my brother, but of course it was easier to make him kind of my brother, and he's fine with that, it turns out. And so definitely those two. And the hardware store owner is he is modeled on the owner of the hardware store here in our neighborhood in California. But when I was back in Kansas City in September, I did go to the store, give him a book, and walked in and said, "Who's the manager?" And there he was, and I didn't know him. And I gave him a book, and he's actually, I think, very much like the person in the book. So that was pretty cool. And then, of course, you mentioned Boris at the beginning, the dog, the German Shepherd, and Boris is definitely Boris. So the dog is right down to, he doesn't do stairs. Yeah.
Yeah, my dogs make it into my books as well.
Yeah, they have that way of warming into your life and your heart and your book, right?
They're our children for sure.
Yes.
What about any publicity for the book? Can you tell us what you found that worked, or maybe even that didn't work?
Since I did not know anything about publicity, I did hire a publicist recommended by my publisher. And she's which is why I'm here today. So that's good. I don't know how much it's helped. Most of the books I've sold are to people in Kansas City, which is not my goal. I want this to be a book that people understand that these are a book that's entertaining to begin with. This is not meant to be a heavy book about racism. It's meant to be an entertaining novel with some other stuff going on. But and it is a universal problem that we don't like to think about. So, we're still working on it. Work in progress.
But tell us about the section that you have brought to share with us today, and then read from it so we can hear your tone and voice.
Okay, I would like to do that. I would like to read the very beginning, because that gives you a sense of what it was like and where the story is going to go. So it's that walking in the front door, and it's this woman who has had some, a reversal of fortune, and that's why she has gone and bought this house, because based on everything we've already said, it's obvious this would be a very inexpensive purchase. So, Chapter 1. God, what have I done? I'm standing just outside the front door of the house I had closed on less than an hour ago. This is a moment of truth. As soon as I open the door, I will know if this is a complete disaster or just a potential one. I'll be able to see half of the house without actually stepping inside. So the first look will tell all, or enough anyway. Okay, open the door. The late afternoon sun, warm on my back, streams in around me and lights the room. Walls and ceiling are stained from a roof leak, and I can see plaster rubble on the floor. The room smells damp and of cigarette smoke and something else, maybe mice. It does not smell like home. I back up a step, take a deep breath, trying not to panic, not to second guess what I have just done. Bought my childhood home 37 years after moving out to go to college, and 34 years after my parents sold the house and fled the increasingly dangerous and unfamiliar neighborhood where they had spent their entire married life. I close my eyes, loosen my grip on the doorknob, and step inside. I'm just going to stop here for a second and say, we've all had these sort of through the door experiences, either where we've gone through the door or we've been, watching an Alfred Hitchcock movie. So I just want to say that that's not happening here. There's no knife. There's no slasher. Okay. She makes it inside. Okay, so back to the story. I had known that it was a big risk, buying this house and thinking I could live in it. The neighborhood is not what anyone would call good. Crime is high, although maybe not as bad as when my parents moved out. I know from my research that owner occupancy is low, and from driving around the neighborhood, that neighborhood businesses have been reduced to liquor stores, beauty shops, storefront churches, and one fast food place. At least as many are boarded up as are in business. It hadn't been that way when I was a child, of course. The 3 and 4 room houses built in the 1930s were set on 40-foot wide lots on streets lined with elm trees. Most were owner occupied when my parents bought the house in 1950. Flowers bloomed, hedges bordered the front yards, people sat out on their porches in the evenings. But within 15 years, times were already changing. Talk of building a freeway through the neighborhood began. Redevelopment efforts downtown pushed Black residents out of crowded tenements, and those who could afford it began testing the policies that had made it hard for them to buy houses. And now, 4 decades on, the freeway has been built, the demographics are completely different, the crime rate is concerning. It's a risk, but my choices are limited, and here I am, home again, maybe.
Wow. I can just see that all playing out. I've been in those neighborhoods for sure, and watched them change. And the scariest thing, I think, for especially those of us who are older, is the crime rate in so many of our cities.
Yes. Yeah, and this, I tried to figure out how, if it was better or worse now in that particular neighborhood. I think that was very turbulent times, the late 60s and early 70s, when the demographics were in the middle of changing. It wasn't, there wasn't a gang and drug issue, but there was just so much resentment.
Do you still make time to read for pleasure? And if so, what genres do you read?
I do. I read a lot, and I read a lot of genres. I really love fiction, but I will read almost anything. And I recently read a book by Ladores Cardell, who's a local Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area judge. She was a judge, and she wrote a very readable book about being a Black female judge, and also about the courts in general, the local courts. And this is another, again, it's about the Santa Clara County courts, but it's their universal court issues. So, and I happened to meet her because she lives here, and someone brought her to our book club, someone who plays pickleball with her. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. So, and I also just read Lori King's latest book, because she also happens to live nearby, and her book was next to mine in the local bookstore. And nice. She was a speaker at a fundraiser where I was volunteering. So it's interesting how you run into people.
What about this second book, or have you started into that?
Yes, the second book is written, and it is with She Writes Press. It will be coming out in about 18 months. Yeah, so it's the same neighborhood, some new characters, and some different issues. It does not the racial issue is there, and it comes up some, but the book is less about that and more about the narrator and her work, really, and dealing with the job market and the job and just being in a corporate job.
You're a fast writer if you've already got a second one ready to go.
Oh, I have more too. I have more ready to go. I just kept writing, even though I couldn't find an agent. I loved writing. So the other books the other books go off in they occur in different places and different types of people, and they're not as much about me.
Does your family support your career as a writer?
Yes, my husband he's very supportive. He loves the idea of my being a writer. He loves the books, which is important to me, partly because I didn't know if this is the kind of book that would only appeal to women. I did not want it to be that. I didn't want it to be just women's literature. But he loves the book and is willing to keep reading it too, all through the proofreading process, and talks about it, and got his friends to come to the book launches, and they've liked it. So he's very supportive. Yeah.
That's great to have our families be able to support us and to enjoy our work.
Yes. I was very happy about that.
Well, Ellen, our last question on authors over 50, as always, our writers over 50 are a unique set. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above?
I do. And that is to get started. I didn't start at 50. I waited a little longer than that. So just really, you have to take the first step, and you don't have to know how you're going to do it or where you're going to go either. You can just, as I did, open that door and walk through it and see what happens. But that doesn't mean you have to finish that way, or you don't even have to write that way. If you like to write an outline, I would just say don't be too wedded to the outline. Let things happen. But don't try to look all the way to the end of picturing it on the shelf. It's nice to do that, but don't worry about all the steps that go between sitting down at your keyboard and getting to the book at the end. So yeah, do it. And remember that you have a lot to offer. As being over 50, you have that life experience that's going to not only inform your book and your story, but it's going to give you lots of little bits to put in it that don't have to be anything like what really happened to you, but they're little bits of inspiration that give you the glitz, I would say, in your story.
Well, I agree. And I'm so excited to read your work and to see more work from you in the future out in the world. And we are excited to now say that you're one of our authors over 50.
Thank you. I love that.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend, and check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing, and remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.